Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Exel. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Brown RISD Program Manager. Should I pass it to someone else, Thea?
Hi, everyone. My name is Thea Manje. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a senior admission officer here at Brown and a liaison for the BRDD program. Mike, how about you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Cameron. I use he, him pronouns. I serve as RISD's Director of Admission, and I've worked with the Brown RISD dual degree program once on the Brown side and now on the RISD side. So I'm really happy to be here. And I'll turn it over to Karen.
Hi, everybody. My name is Karen. I'm a third year in the Brown RISD dual degree program. I use she/they pronouns.
Hi, my name is Anay Agarwal. I'm a second year in the dual degree program, and I use he, him pronouns.
All right, and I'm Emily. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a RISD admissions officer. And I'll also be moderating today's Brown RISD dual degree Q&A/Ask Admissions Anything webinar. So we're so thrilled to have you all here today. And I think we are ready to jump into a short presentation before the Q&A begins. Take it away, Mike.
All right. Can everyone see that? Great. And I'll turn it over to Hannah.
Okay, great. So thank you all for joining us tonight again. I'm going to share a little bit about the Brown RISD dual degree program, which we call BRDD. And then talk very briefly about the applications. So just very broad strokes, the Brown RISD dual degree program offers students the chance to earn an undergrad degree from Brown and an undergrad degree from RISD, both over the course of 5 years. And it's a quite small cohort, about 15 students in each year. So we have around 75 students enrolled at any time. The RISD degree that BRDD students earn is a Bachelor of Fine Arts. It can be in any of the majors at RISD, except for the Bachelor's in Architecture, which is itself a 5-year program. And at Brown, students can pursue any concentration except for the PLME program in liberal medical education, which I believe is 8 years. The Brown degree can be a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science, and we have over 80 concentrations to choose from, not including independent concentrations, which I imagine Thea will mention a little bit later. So altogether, there are over 1,200 possible degree combinations, and some have yet to be taken on by BRDD students. So tuition and aid are administered by Brown, but BRDD students are fully enrolled at both Brown and RISD, and they can access all of the resources available at both institutions. We've got 2 staff members, a co-chair at each institution, and our 10 peer advisors. You'll meet Anay and Karen more in depth in a minute. And the dual degree students have access to their own lounge space in Brown's campus center. We do several things for the BRDD program each year, the opportunity to participate in an annual student organized exhibition. We've got monthly brunches and other social gatherings in the community. So a little bit about the application process for BRDD. You would apply to both schools separately as a first year. You can't transfer into the Brown RISD dual degree program, which includes if you have enrolled in but not completed a degree at another, a college degree at another institution. So you'd need to be admitted to both schools separately, and then you'd be considered for BRDD. The only additional component of each school's first year application is the supplemental BRDD essay, which asks basically why you want to go into the dual degree and how you see yourself integrating your studies at both schools. And we recommend being as specific as you can at this point about how you want to combine your pursuits at each school. So you'll find more information on the Brown RISD dual degree website. The short link is risd.brown.edu. I want to particularly point people to the admissions tab on the website, which you can see at the top. There you'll find a lot of application information, frequently asked questions, and under the admissions tab, also a recording of the webinar we offered earlier this month. That's also where you'll eventually find the recording of this session if you want to revisit it. So I think that's all for me for now. I'll pass it back to Mike.
Great, thank you so much. So as Hannah mentioned, students do have to apply to both institutions. So I'm going to take a moment to talk just broadly about the admission process to RISD. And, again, it's going to be pretty broad, so we'll really reserve any in-depth answers when the questions come up in just a moment. So like Brown University, RISD offers an early decision round. It is binding, and students can apply to the Brown RISD dual degree program early decision, but only to one of the two institutions. And then if admitted, you would then be given permission to apply regular decision to the other institution. Our early decision deadline is coming up right around the corner on November 1st. We release decisions in mid-December. And if admitted, but not admitted to the dual degree, you would ultimately still need to honor your commitment through the ED round. About 90% of RISD's applications come through the regular decision round. Our application deadline is a little bit later than Brown's. It's on January 15th. And that is, of course, not binding, and students will, who are admitted will have until May 1st to commit. Financial aid deadlines are very important, although I know this is, a webinar specific to the Brown RISD dual degree, and Brown University does manage the financial aid. If admitted to RISD, these deadlines are still going to be important, and you're going to want to follow the requirements. So if you are applying early decision, the financial aid deadline is November 15th. We utilize two different forms: the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid, which should be filled out by all domestic applicants. And all applicants, international or domestic, would also fill out what we call the institutional form, which is something you'll have access to in your applicant portal after you submit your application for admission. It's a condensed version of the CSS profile, but we just ultimately ask the questions on our own. And then for those applying through the regular decision round, you'd apply by February 15th. All of our application requirements and some additional information about those can be found on our website if you just go to the first year admission section. But just broadly, we do ask, we are a common application institution, so you will fill that out along with the college essay that comes within that. We require one letter of recommendation. We'll accept up to 3, and we have no preference who they come from. It is always helpful to have an academic recommendation, but if you want to choose that from an art instructor or an after-school art program, you're more than welcome to do that. We, of course, ask for a portfolio. All applicants to RISD will need to submit that, and we ask for 12 to 20 images of what you consider to be your best work, but also work that's representative of who you are as an artist and what your intentions are through art and design. Whether you're a domestic student or international, if English is not your native language and you have not been studying at an institution where English is the language of instruction, we would ask that you submit an English proficiency exam. You can see the 3 that we accept: the TOEFL, IELTS, and the Duolingo, and all of our minimum requirements are listed on our website. And at RISD, we are test optional. So we do not require the SAT or ACT, and about 2/3 of our applicants apply test optional. You are, of course, welcome to submit those exam scores. They will be considered as part of your academic profile if you choose to submit them. And then finally, we ask, of course, for your high school transcripts. So we would want to see those. And then whether they have first quarter grades, mid-year, we would ask for those as well. And then my last slide here before I turn it over to Thea is just a note about upcoming portfolio days. We could go into incredible detail about portfolio development, but we also just want to make you aware that we have these virtual options as well as in-person options that allow you to get feedback on your work. It's important to know that RISD does not use this as part of your application process. We won't sort of waive a portfolio requirement or accept quote unquote accepted on the spot. It's really a service to give you feedback and a RISD perspective. It's a great opportunity to learn a little bit more about ways you can push your work, new directions and new tools, and get that RISD perspective. And so all of these are also listed on our website if you would like further information on them. And I will now turn it over to Thea.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, so I'm just going to speak briefly about the Brown application process at large and just a little bit about our review process and as well as financial aid. So I always think the defending feature of a Brown education is our open curriculum. I often feel that it's best described by what it's not. There's going to be no course requirements that you have to take in a gen ed respect. So no required science, math, things like that. And students really, they don't use the open curriculum to take less, they use it to take more and to really immerse themselves in the over 80 undergraduate concentrations that we offer. And I'm sure that we'll speak more about this as we get the Q&A started. I'm going to speak a little bit about the admission checklist. Again, it's pretty boilerplate. You can see everything on the slide that's presented here. We also have 2 admission rounds. So we have early decision and regular decision, just like RISD does. And our early decision admission deadline is also, or rather the process of applying an early decision is also binding for us. So if you are committing an early decision, that means that Brown is your #1 choice and you would absolutely matriculate if you were admitted. And the same will go for all students admitted at Brown in early decision. If admitted, you will then be authored access to be able to apply to RISD to be able to participate in the BRDD program. So for us, we're going to require your official secondary school transcripts, your Common App and the Brown supplementary questions, as well as a standardized test score. So for us this year, we are requiring testing. So you'll submit either an SAT or an ACT score, and we will super score. So if you've taken the exam multiple times, we'll take the best of and use that to evaluate your application. And then you'll submit your letters of recommendation to us, as well as your school forms. And then there are a few optional components to the application that I would just like to touch on. We offer a video introduction. It's kind of our last horizon of really being able to see students and really hear from them in their own voice. We no longer conduct alumni interviews. So this is just an amazing way to really show us who you are. And I've seen everything under the sun for these video introductions. I've had students introduce me to all of their pets. I've had students take me on a tour of a summer job, walk me through a family recipe, but really just an amazing way for us to be able to see another side of you that isn't otherwise explicated in the paper application. So as mentioned, there's a couple of things on this slide. We're mentioning the program on liberal medical education, the PLME program, and just so you know, that wouldn't be able to overlap with the BRDD program, as Hannah mentioned. So students that are applying would just be able to apply to the BRDD, and those are just our 2 special programs that are mentioned on the slide there. All right, we can head to the next slide there, Mike. Perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to touch a little bit on financial aid. I often feel like this is one of the most overwhelming and confusing processes as far as applying to college is concerned, and I want to just break it down as simply as possible. So for all students admitted to the BRDD program, they will fall under the umbrella of Brown's financial aid, and it's really an amazing financial aid policy. So I'm just going to break it down as simply as I can. First of all, we're need blind. So essentially the demonstrated financial need of an applicant or if an applicant's family is not a factor in how we make any of our admission decisions. We offer strictly need-based financial aid, so we offer no additional merit scholarship to students. So if you're like a rock star soccer player or an amazing chemist, we're not offering additional funding to those students. It's all need-based financial aid. And we calculate what that demonstrated financial need is by, in an ideal world, using the FAFSA. I know that there's a lot of FAFSA drama going on right now. So in the interim, we'll use the CSS profile if you're applying an early decision and don't have access to the FAFSA at the moment. You'll submit those documents to us, and using that, we'll be able to calculate what your demonstrated financial need is. And as part of the Brown Promise, we agree to meet 100% of that demonstrated financial need, and we do it without loans. So for the majority, or very, very close to the majority of the students at Brown are receiving financial aid. And another just great initiative this year is, it's our 2nd year with this program, we offer a books and materials program. So any student receiving any financial aid at Brown has the full cost of their books and course materials covered as well, which can also be very beneficial in a art school setting. So on that note, I think I'm handing it back off to Hannah.
Okay, so hopefully you've started to get a sense by this point that there are lots of different ways to be a RISD student, to be a Brown student, and to be a student in the dual degree program. And no 2 people in the dual degree program will have exactly the same experience, but I'm excited to introduce you now to 2 of our wonderful peer advisors, students, Karen Dial and Anay Agarwal. So they'll each tell you a little bit about themselves and the artistic and academic work and the other things they're exploring at Brown and RISD. And then when we move to the Q&A portion, they'll also answer questions. And just a quick note that Karen will need to take off around 6:45. So with that, Karen, you are up.
All right, thanks, Hannah. Hello again, everybody. My name is Karen. As I said before, I am a third-year student in the Brown RISD dual degree program. I'm from Long Island, New York, which is about 30, well, where I'm from is about 30 minutes outside of Manhattan. And it's just about 3.5 hours southwest of Providence, Rhode Island. So I'm studying environmental science at Brown. I've declared a bachelor's of science, and I'm on the track of conservation, science, and natural systems. And at RISD, I'm studying interior architecture. So just to kind of take you through some of my work, this first slide that I have here is a lot of my early work from my experience in the program. Those first couple images are, the first one actually is one of the illustrations that I applied to the program with, but also something that I still feel kind of holds a certain relevance to my combined fields as far as my explorations of ecology within art go. That second image is a EFS assignment that I had to do. So for anybody who isn't aware, EFS is your experimental foundation studios, which during your first year at RISD, that's a super heavy part of your curriculum. You get to explore a bunch of different mediums, a bunch of different realms of art and design. And so that was one project that came out of that for me. And that third image is my first experience with winter session, which is another RISD requirement, where you also get this really, really great wide breadth of opportunities to kind of explore different realms that you may not have explored before. So that class and that model that you see there is one thing that kind of made me realize I wanted to study interior architecture. And we could go on to the next slide. And these images are a little bit more of the work that I've done at RISD since being in my major. So that first image is a site plan of the Hudson River Valley, which was also one of those sort of gateway projects for me into understanding this is something I can see myself doing. And the three images on the right side are interior architecture department projects that I've completed within the past year or so. The middle one, if any of you have visited RISD's campus yet, may or may not recognize as the RISD Museum's Cafe. It's an analytique of that structure, which was super interesting. You get a really great hands-on experience in any department, but that experience for me was one of the first forays I really got into what my department looked like. And that last project on the side there was a similar experience. Yeah, can go on to the next slide, and just to kind of give a quick little overview of the other things on campus that I'm involved in. In addition to being a Brown RISD dual degree peer advisor, am also a gender and sexuality peer counselor at Brown Stonewall House, which is our LGBTQ center, which works in tandem with the Brown Sarah Doyle Center for Women and Gender, to kind of create this program that essentially just fosters community and different forms of programming, which is what my position is really there. Finding different ways to connect people across Brown's campus, which also ties in a lot of RISD's campus as well at a lot of points. That image on the right was a Brown outing club trip to the Queens River in Rhode Island. It was a cute little kayaking trip, which is one of my favorite things to do here and at home. So one of my favorite pastimes in Providence is going on Brown outing club trips, which are a great opportunity to kind of see more of Providence and just get to know the city that you're living in once you start going to school here. That's a bit of an overview. So I'll hand it over to Ane to tell you about his work.
Hi, thank you, Karen. My name is Ane. I am a second year in the dual degree program, majoring in furniture design at RISD and intending to concentrate in urban studies at Brown. So I'm going to start from the rightmost image, actually. So that's a self-portrait that I did during EFS, like Karen explained, which is your freshman year program at RISD. And I included that because I kind of wanted to tell you guys about how I came into RISD, and primarily having only done paintings before. My primary medium was oil paint, and my entire application and portfolio were oil paintings that I had done throughout high school. But I really think RISD's freshman year program and the different opportunities allowed me to sort of explore out of what I was comfortable with, and which leads me to the other pictures on this slide. The middle image is a lamp that I designed for my spatial dynamics class, which is one of your 3 studios you take freshman year, out of wood, and it is a called the scorpion tail lamp. It's supposed to mimic the movement of a scorpion tail, and it unfolds. And then the image on the left is a table that I designed and created during RISD's winter session, which is a great mini winter semester that RISD offers. I'm sure we can talk more about that later in the Q&A. But yeah, so these are 2 examples of early explorations that I did in furniture, which sort of allowed me to, realize that this was something I was interested in majoring in. Go to the next slide. So yeah, here I just have some more images of things that I'm doing specifically in furniture. So as a second year in the program, this is my first year actually taking classes within my major. So right now it's pretty introductory level stuff, but still some cool things nonetheless. The picture on the left is actually another thing that I did during my freshman year. That's a drum that I made for an assignment where the assignment was to create an instrument. So that was another cool opportunity. But right now my work is sort of consisting of spending time in the wood shop, learning hand tools. It's a spoon that we just carved for an assignment out of a block of cherry. And then a lot of sketching, orthographic drawings, and sort of learning about the basics of how to construct a drawing. And also there's a digital side to that as well, with CAD rendering and modeling. And right now I'm working on a plant stand, which is super exciting. It's always like fun to be able to make things in class and then keep them and use them for like the rest of your life, hopefully. So I've had a lot of fun so far in my major classes, experimenting and learning about woodworking and furniture. Go to the next slide. So the main thing that I am a part of outside of like Karen being a dual degree advisor and being a student at both schools is a cappella. So I'm super excited and passionate about a cappella. I don't know if you can tell from these pictures, but so this is the Brown Jabberwocks, Brown's oldest a cappella group. And it's a big community that, it takes up a lot of my time at Brown, but one that I'm super lucky to be a part of. We tour, we compete. It's like Pitch Perfect. If you've ever seen Pitch Perfect, it's like scarily accurate, actually. But yeah, we just went on tour to Seoul, South Korea this past summer for 10 days. So there's a couple pictures from that tour on this slide. It was a super amazing experience. And last spring, we placed 3rd at the ICCA's quarterfinals. So another really awesome thing. And yeah, I sang in high school, sang a cappella in high school, and I knew it was something I wanted to continue in college. And I'm so glad that I did. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me. Thank you.
All right, thank you all so much for your thoughtful, informative presentations. I hope it was helpful for us all to kind of meet on the same page when it comes to BRDD. We do have the email addresses to both RISD admissions and Brown admissions up on the screen, so please take note of those. If you have any questions about the specific admissions processes for either institution, please reach out to those institutions separately. Today's webinar is focused entirely on the dual degree experience and this particular dual degree application experience. So we're going to try to focus on those questions for today. So we will begin kind of the Q&A portion of today, and we're going to start off strong with a really broad question that I'm going to bring to the students first. So this question is, how do students pursuing this program use their education to better the world? What impact do they leave in communities beyond their campus, and how can prospective students demonstrate their determination to do so in their application? So if you guys want to talk a little bit about how you've been able to branch out into communities. I know your presentation's kind of already introduced those topics.
I'll just start briefly. I'd love to hear from others, but I think a really great example of this is many of the Brown RISD dual degree 5th year's capstone presentations, which they give at the end of their 5th year. So I'm dropping the link in the chat right now to the archive of capstone presentations. You can see there are, I'm thinking specifically, Amelia Mon from 2022 gave an amazing sort of within her capstone presentation fashion show of designs that she made with sustainable fabrics that she learned to create as an apparel design major and an engineering concentrator at Brown. So there are tons of different examples in different fields. We also have two students, Joe Uyong and Alex Hogue, who just finished up their Maharam fellowships, which they received through RISD, which are specifically focused on social change. And I'll drop another link in the chat right now to the news and events page of our website, where you can see some examples of things that BRDD students and alumni are doing out in the world. So that's there now.
Awesome, that's so helpful, Hannah. Anay or Karen, do you have any additional insight into how your education can kind of impact the world at large?
Yeah, absolutely. Hannah makes a great point. I think additionally, outside of just the standard like extracurriculars that Anay and I discussed, you'd be surprised how much opportunity you get to really engage with community just through your coursework at both institutions. One example of many, one of my foundational environmental science courses kind of took on a structure where aside from your weekly lectures, you would also have a sort of hands-on discussion section that's entire purpose was community engagement. So each section was assigned to a different local Rhode Island organization that you then got to work with in different ways. There are a lot of RISD design courses that will team up with local institutions, local organizations, whatever it may be, to help them design, whether it's, a space or an object or a concept. There are tons of opportunities just within your coursework to do that. I think when it comes to your application and kind of expressing that desire to really engage with your community, I think any sort of way that you define community and talking about maybe past experiences you've had in your own community where you've grown up or where you've attended school, I think all of those things would definitely add a lot of strength to just the person who's reading that application really receiving how much that's something that you care about.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that answer. That's really thoughtful. So my next question is for Mike, because he has experience kind of crossing over between both institutions on the admissions side. Mike, how would you describe the chemistry between Brown and RISD, particularly in the BRDD program, but also just in terms of the community here in Providence?
Oh, that's a great question. And it's a little challenging to answer because I haven't gone through the program as a student, so but what I like to talk about is that I think you can't really go through your experience at RISD or at Brown without overlapping in some way. And it's, somebody asked me recently, is there sort of a rivalry? And I think that absolutely not. I think there's really a good chemistry between the two institutions, and there's so many opportunities that open up as a result of the partnership. And so I just think that the flexibility that this program affords, it's remarkable. I don't know if the students, Anae or Karen, if you want to talk a little bit about the play or like what it's like to go back and forth between institution and like your identity with each would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree, Mike, that like there's quite a bit of interplay between two schools. And I think being in the program is like so special because you get to sort of experience all of that at once. But I know that I saw a question as well at whether you're allowed to take classes, whether you go to RISD and you can take a class at Brown or vice versa, and that's another factor that plays into sort of the link between two schools. I know that, and don't know all the details, but I'm sure someone else could pick that up. But there is opportunities within your course load to take class at either school and cross register, even if you're not part of the program. But I think extracurriculars are also a big thing. Most clubs at Brown and RISD are across both schools, and I think that's a great way to not only meet new people but also just learn from each other. I think it's very interesting in terms of like identity at both schools. You know, each school sort of have like their own jokey sort of, you know, image of the other one. And, you know, RISD's an art school and everyone's artsy. And, you know, every school sort of has like their associations with it. But for them, like on the whole, I think my Brown community and my Brown friends loves the sort of, like love seeing the work that, you know, RISD people are making. I think public like exhibitions and going to galleries and stuff, that's another thing that like is very much a part of both schools. And that's another way where I think they interact a lot. So yeah.
Awesome. And this kind of leads into a question that I have for Hannah as a sort of overseer or advisor to this program. What would you say, like, to what extent do BRDD students feel connected and integrated on both campuses? And what sort of support services do you have for students who are trying to make a home on both campuses?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the hope is that everyone will feel at home at Brown, at home at RISD, and at home as a dual degree student. And we also know that that's kind of a tall order being part of so many different communities, as well as the home communities you come from and all of that. So I will say that some people do end up feeling a bit more gravitating toward a bit more towards social scenes at one school or the other at different times, and that can be great. We do also, I think I mentioned, make a lot of efforts to sort of get the Brown RISD dual degree students of different years together through brunches in our BRDD lounge and other places. So I think the answer will really vary based on whichever BRDD student you talk to, but we try to be very thoughtful about that sense of belonging on both campuses and as a BRDD student. And in terms of the support services that are offered, as a BRDD student, you are able to go to Brown or RISD CAPS, counseling and psychological services, health services. You may have an RA or a community coordinator from either school that lives in the same dorm as you. You also have a academic advisor at Brown and at RISD at all times. And then we have dedicated peer. So Anay and Karen are two of our currently 10 dedicated peer advisors in the Brown RISD dual degree program. So they're all BRDD students who are advising all BRDD students. And myself and Jordan Rockford, who is our assistant dean for Brown RISD programs, are also advisors. So we specifically advise all students in Brown RISD dual degree at any time. And that can be helpful because while your RISD advisor or your Brown advisor is an expert at that school and eventually in the area that you are pursuing, they don't always have the full picture of what you're doing at both schools. So that's why the Brown RISD dual degree specific advising can be helpful. We can also get a good sense of what the resources available are at both schools and share that information.
Amazing. Thank you, Hannah. So I wanted to shift into a little bit more admissions-based questions because I'm seeing a lot of those pop up in the chat. So I'm going to start off with a question for Thea, which is kind of about the Brown side of the application in the context of the BRDD process. So should students who are applying to both RISD and Brown in the effort to join the dual degree program, should these students also submit their exact same portfolio to Brown? How will you be reviewing their visual artwork in the Brown application separately? And do you have any guidance in that process in general?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So students do not have to submit the same portfolio to both institutions. It's kind of at your own jurisdiction which work you'd like to include in either way. Sometimes they have different narrative framings, different things that you want to include, and that is totally up to you how you submit them. That said, our in our office, so on the Brown side of things, we have our visual arts faculty evaluate those portfolios. And for RISD specifically, your admission office, well, the admission office has a much more hands-on approach. So for us, we're utilizing the resources of our visual arts department to evaluate the portfolios. So I would say, when it comes to the Brown portfolio, it's such a holistic process. There's so many pieces of the puzzle that come together to come to a cumulative decision for an applicant. And for someone applying to a program like the BRDD, Brown is already such an interdisciplinary place, and the BRDD program really adds another layer to it all. So I always think that, when you're applying, this is more just general application advice, Emily, but I'll just chime in here and say it while I can, is, the application gives you so many great opportunities to showcase different sides of yourself, and students who are interested in and are admitted to the BRDD program are really people who are so multifaceted and have so many different talents and interests. And I always say, don't be afraid to use those different components of the application to really show as many sides of yourself as you can. It's very difficult to see a whole person just from a written application. And I think that places like the portfolio and the video introduction, like I had mentioned earlier, and all your supplementary answers are going to really give you all those opportunities to show us who you are and all the different framework and all the different kind of the prism of the human that we're looking at through these applications.
Amazing. That's such a comprehensive answer. And I'm going to flip it to you, Mike. For the RISD application, what are we typically looking to see in the portfolio, and how can BRDD students really utilize that portion of the RISD application to showcase their skill set?
Yeah, we sometimes refer to the portfolio as a visual resume, and I think that's really true, that as we're, building this idea of who you are as an applicant, we're going to be looking to the portfolio to see if some of the things you're doing outside of the classroom or outside of the studio are aligning. And so we really just want to understand more about your intentions. I think we're also really in tune with how much a student is a maker. How is it part of who you are, and are you an innate maker? That's one of the really true marks of a RISD student. But I would just add one last thing, because portfolio and artwork can be so subjective. We do have multiple perspectives that are coming both through staff and faculty when we're looking at the portfolio, and to some extent we are looking at it in the context of experimental and foundation studies. How likely are you to thrive in an environment where there's a lot of open-ended answers, a lot of gray area? And it doesn't always have to be the perfect technical skill. It's oftentimes just showing your interest in using unconventional materials, branching off in a new direction that really excites the committee. And so it just becomes one part of the full story that you're telling through your application.
That's really helpful. And students, folks are dying to know, what did you guys write about in your essays for the BRDD supplement? Karen, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I wrote about, it's interesting to see how it's changed, but I sort of wrote about my initial interest in architecture, and sort of breaking down how I think the curriculum at each respective school would sort of lend itself to a possible career in architecture. I wrote about my previous work in painting, and just sort of how I think visual arts education is expansive in so many ways, not necessarily only if you would like to pursue a career in the visual arts, but I just think having the tenets of design and creative thought, I think, are very important in many fields that you might want to go into. But specifically, I talked about my work in painting and how I think it would contribute to sort of that philosophy of design and creative process. And then I talked about my interest in anthropology and history, and how I think having that framework, knowing our past to sort of guide our future, was this sort of Brown into things. So I think I touched on how I would use each school individually to bring them together, and where I would take that in the future. Obviously, after having seen what I'm pursuing now, that has changed a little bit, but I think that's the beauty of once you're in the program, you really are you're open to exploring a lot of things. But for the most part, I would say a lot of the core philosophies and things I talked about in the essay are still true. So that's good good for myself.
Yeah, I think I spoke about a lot of similar refrains. I definitely talked about the inherent intersectionality between design and a more sort of traditional liberal arts education. I think that is probably something that a lot of you who are applying probably already see in your educational experience. So that was kind of my foundation. And then I discussed my history with illustration and my passion for it and where I wanted that to take me. I talked about my love of literature as well and how I thought that those two things at each institution could kind of come together. Similarly to Ane, I definitely ended up in quite a different place. I going in was sort of on a humanities and fine arts track, and I am now on a STEM and design track. So stuff changes. It's super fine if this feels intimidating right now to kind of have to map out exactly what you sort of want to use this program to explore. But yeah, I think I would echo a lot of what Ane said and just think about it as an opportunity to kind of talk about your own experiences thus far in your academic experience and where you see that taking you. But you're definitely not like tied down to what you say. They're not gonna force you to study English literature because you said that that's what you want to study in your application essay.
Great, that's really helpful to hear from you both. All right, so I wanted to kind of expand beyond admissions for a bit here now. Hannah, can you talk a little bit about the opportunities that BRDD students have outside of the classroom in terms of study abroad, internships, career-based experiences, experiences that are just for fun, all of that good stuff?
It's hard to talk just a little bit about that because there are so many things. There are so many opportunities available to RISD students, so many opportunities available to Brown students. And then when you combine the two, it is a pretty incredible range. So in terms of study abroad, students can study abroad through programs affiliated with Brown or through RISD. Both schools offer summer study, fall or spring semester study abroad. And then RISD also does some winter session travel courses through RISD Global. Same thing with internships. I just answered a question about this in the Q&A. And by the way, if you haven't yet paged through the Q&A tabs, there are a lot of helpful answers popping up in there. But Brown and RISD career centers both offer a lot of support in finding and applying to internships. So a lot of BRDD students do that at some point or another, either through the career centers or things that they find on their own. The other part was about student activities, I think, Emily. So you can join clubs and student organizations through either school. And that's actually true of a lot of activities. Even if you are a Brown student or a RISD student, many of the clubs have combined membership. Was there a part of that I was missing there? Can you remind me?
I think you touched on all of the important pieces. I guess the main thing would just be, the websites are a great resource for exploring more of those things as well. I do want to.
One last
Go ahead.
thing.
Yeah.
Oh, just there are a lot of both Brown and RISD offer a lot of grants and research awards, things like that. So that's another way that Brown RISD dual degree students can take advantage of applying to grants and opportunities from either school.
Amazing. I just wanted to take a quick pause and say that Karen has to depart us now for today. So thank you, Karen, for being here today.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great
All right, so we'll jump into a few more questions. We got a lot of questions for the students, and I apologize we weren't able to get to all of them while both of them are here. But Ane, if you're able to take kind of the lead on some of these, what would you say was the most surprising thing about BRDD after coming, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things with college in general. It's just such a big transition for anyone, regardless of whether you're in this program or not. But for me, I think the most surprising part was just realizing the different types of art that I found myself engaged in. I think, my art education prior to coming to this program was, I sort of touched on it briefly, but a very traditional sort of drawing and painting education. And for me, it was really awesome coming to RISD, being exposed to so many different types of artists, different types of work, going to different exhibitions, different artist talks. And I really would urge anyone to take advantage of that. I think RISD's EFS program is, like it, stated in the name, is very experimental, and it's meant to be that way. And so I think you can go into that with sort of this mindset of, who you are as an artist, and like you're here to sort of further that. But for me, it was like a welcome surprise to find out, that I really enjoyed this stop motion project that I did for this class, or like I really enjoy woodworking, which is, what I'm now doing for the next 4 years. So that, I think, for me, was one of the biggest surprises. I'm trying to think of what else. No bad surprises, to be honest. I mean, all good things for sure. Yeah.
Amazing. That's really helpful to hear. Okay, I wanted to ask a few particular questions because I know we're, getting into the early decision deadlines for RISD and Brown, and even the regular decision deadlines as well. So Thea and Mike, if you can kind of tag team this one, can you talk a little bit more about, if you're accepted to one school, waitlist at the other, the different variations that can happen in the process that might make the trajectory a little bit confusing, if you can kind of explain how it all goes down.
Sure, I can start. So from the Brown perspective here, and I think that this would apply for RISD too, if you apply an early decision to either school, it will be a binding decision, which means that you will agree to matriculate to that institution, regardless of your admission to the BRDD program. So essentially you would be admitted to, let's say you're admitted to Brown, an early decision. So you find out in mid-December that you've been admitted. Wahoo, exciting, great. Okay, now you are matriculated at Brown and you've been granted permission to apply to RISD to then be considered for the BRDD program, at which point the decisions are made in the spring. So nobody finds out that they've been admitted to the BRDD program in the wintertime. You always find out in the spring. So the same thing kind of applies in inverse for RISD. You would be admitted to RISD in early decision, and then you would be granted permission to apply to Brown for the regular decision round, because again, they're binding, so you can be applying to other schools normally. And then the application would be looked at by our committee, and then again, the decisions would be made to admit them to the BRDD program in the springtime.
Yeah, there's not much more I would add other than, it just keeping in mind that it is possible to be admitted to both institutions and not the dual degree. So you will receive a specific letter of admission to the program. And that would, depend on being admitted to both institutions. The last thing I would say is that the FAQ on the dual degree site is very helpful and sort of walks through that process of applying early decision to one of the two institutions.
That's super helpful. So there's a lot of different sort of variations that the path can take, but just know that you'll get email guidance throughout the whole process, as long as you've submitted your applications to both schools and that supplemental essay. All right, I'm noticing that we have about 9 minutes left, so I'm going to try to get a few more questions squeezed in here towards the end. This next one is for Anae. What was it about the program that made you want to apply and attend? And can you talk a little bit more about that decision-making process for you?
Sure, yeah. I think for me, it was pretty clear early on that I wanted to go to a place that would allow me to explore art in any capacity. So I think the initial draw was definitely Brown's open curriculum, just knowing, if I didn't get into the program, I would still have sort of that freedom to explore art and design alongside my other interests, regardless of whether or not I was admitted into the program. I think, so that, like I said, that was the initial draw for sure. But I think I did a lot of the same things I'm sure a lot of you are doing right now, like doing a lot of research, watching like people's vlogs on YouTube and different things like that. And I think the more I found out about the work students were doing, how they were managing their times at both, they're managing their time at both schools, the different combinations of majors and concentrations, the more I was sort of convinced that this was like this program specifically was definitely my my dream and my goal. Just because I think the combinations that you're sort of given the opportunity to work with, I think are super unique, and the resources at both schools by themselves are amazing. And when you combine them, that's definitely like to me, it's the best of both worlds sort of situation. So that was my thought process going in. But yeah, initially it was just like, I didn't want to sacrifice having an art education, which is potentially something that, I think goes through a lot of people's minds when they think of pursuing art and design semi-professionally, professionally. Yeah.
Yeah, and Ine, you and Karen are both great examples of the type of student that really thrives in the BRDD program. Hannah, I was hoping you could kind of talk a little bit more about this question of what type of student is BRDD looking for. It's a question we get a lot, and there's no concise answer for it, but I'm hoping you can provide some insight as to that.
Yeah, it is a good question, and I end up feeling a lot of times like my answer is vague, but that's really because there's no one type of person. I have a lot of students who I see regularly who are really different in terms of their interests and in terms of their personalities, who are glad that they chose BRDD and are thriving, and success can look really different for those types of people and their goals. So, one thing that I would say is that as a BRDD student, it is beneficial to be really curious and open-minded, and also a planner and a self-advocate, because the curriculum and your path through it can be pretty complicated. So it's just helpful to kind of be someone who's excited about the idea of being able to direct your own education. um, I also think, it is really, it's a program where there are a lot of expectations and a lot of, it's a lot of classes. It's 5 years. These are both really um, wonderful institutions where you'll be inspired by and surrounded by pretty amazing peers. So it can be helpful to just kind of be grounded in yourself and know who you are and what you want to do. I know that that's a tall order for someone coming out of high school, but I think that that's what we see in a lot of dual degree students, is people who are really passionate about the work that they do, and that kind of carries them through what can be a fairly intense program. And of course, with that, I may sound like a broken record, but there are a lot of resources and supports available to everyone. So it's not that you need to be sort of on your own doing your own thing, but it can be helpful to really know what's driving you.
Yeah, Mike, do you guys have any additional insights as to what, as committee members, you love to see in a BRDD application?
Yeah, I'll start very quickly, and I would ultimately echo everything that Hannah said. It's it really just takes the words right out of my mouth. But maybe I can uncover what the committee process looks like, because I think that's also helpful to know that there are many different perspectives that are coming to the review of BRDD candidates. So we of course know that as you're being reviewed for each institution, Brown and RISD are going to be looking at your fit for those institutions individually. But when we get to this point in the spring, when we're reviewing the finalists, we have faculty from Brown, faculty from RISD, staff from both institutions, Hannah, Jordan from the dual degree program. So we're bringing many perspectives to the review, and the dialogue that takes place is really going back and forth between all of the information in the application. So it's just a really, really fascinating. And I also would just echo, there's no one type of student, but I just think generally, if you have an interest in the open curriculum, you're likely going to your interests are probably going to align with the program to some extent, for sure.
Thea, do you have any other insights to add? It's totally okay if not.
I think I have very little to add. I think that Mike and Hannah have covered it spectacularly.
For sure. I mean, it's a big question, but I think the ongoing answer, and one that we talk about a lot at RISD, is just being true to yourself in the application. As cheesy as that sounds, we want to get to know you. All right, so we are nearing the end. We have about 2 minutes left. I'm trying to find a great question to end with that will sort of tie everything up nicely in a bow. I suppose I would love to hear, Anay, just a little bit more about what you're working on and in this current moment, and any advice that you would give to prospective students at this time.
Sure, yeah. So just to reiterate, like I am in my first year of furniture design at RISD, and I'm continuing to take classes in the urban studies concentration at Brown, political science, environmental science. I think urban studies in and of itself is quite an interdisciplinary concentration at Brown, which is awesome. Dual degree students love the word interdisciplinary wherever it can be applied. So I'm very excited about the work that I'm hope soon to produce, and I'm very excited to learn from upperclassmen. I think that's another thing right now, being an underclassman, being a sophomore in the program, looking a lot to the older students, seeing what paths they're taking, and that has been super awesome. Advice to prospective students: I really can't emphasize enough how important it is from an application perspective. I think you are trying to showcase the genuine, authentic, the most genuine, authentic version of yourself. And I think that is what really sets people that are considered for this program apart, at least speaking from my experience in people in my cohort and people in other years in the program. Like I feel like it's very clear who they are as people, and it's such a clear link in terms of what they're studying at each school. And it's really just impressive seeing so many people on a daily basis that are so passionate about the work that they're doing. So again, advice would just be to stay passionate about what you're doing, and really let that authenticity and drive for your work shine through in your application, because I think that is the most important part. You're showcasing not only maybe the most impressive parts of you, but also all parts of you. And I think that sometimes is easy to forget. So yeah, that's helpful.
I think that's super helpful, and it's a great note to end us off with, I think, as well. So I just want to reiterate that this recording of this webinar will be posted on RISD's YouTube channel, and I believe the Brown RISD dual degree website as well. So if you want to learn more about this information, check back on what we talked about, kind of refresh, it will be available to you as a recording. And we are all available to you as resources, both RISD admissions, Brown admissions, and our BRDD folks here as well. So we'll post our email addresses in the chat. You can find them on the website, but please reach out with any questions. This is a really exciting time of the year where the college application process is really in full swing. So does anyone have anything else to add before we wrap up? I think we're all set. All right. Well, thanks everyone so much. We wish you the best of luck with this semester and hope to see your applications come through soon. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.